Hi, I'm Richard Friedman, and welcome to my video cartoon for January 30th, 2026. Here we have President Trump in the Oval Office here, and he received a letter or email or whatever it was from Kristi Noem requesting a conference in the Oval Office. So President Trump granted that conference, and that was right after the border czar Tom Homan. Trump appointed apparently border czar Tom Homan to take over operations in Minnesota, particularly Minneapolis. So the title of my cartoon here is Richard's Trump and Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem meet at her request after border czar Tom Homan takes over operations in Minnesota. That in the wake of the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy by border agents, in Minneapolis. Given in wake of that killing, Noem falsely accused Preddy of brandishing his gun. Brandishing means like he was just going out there with his gun. And we saw in the video that what he had here, in one hand, he was directing traffic. The other hand, he had his cell phone, and we saw that. We never saw his gun as a part of him. We saw a police officer when he was down on the ground taking a gun away from him when he was lying flat on the ground. We saw that, but we never saw the connection, a direct connection between him brandishing the gun, that semi-automatic that he had. So that's the discrepancy there. And President Trump is going over the report. Just read the report here, and he sees the discrepancy, and he feels that Kristi Noem is very, very loyal to him, and he picked her, he really as one of his loyalists, and he feels that she's been doing a great job up to now. And this is a little snafu here. So President Trump appears to be willing to overlook this, and so with that in mind, I pursue this cartoon here that I created here. President Trump, and here's Kristi Noem here with her American flag on her shoulder. There she is in the Oval Office with President Donald J. Trump here. And he's got that report on his desk. So here's the action here is this. Given in the wake of that killing, Noem falsely accused Preddy of brandishing his gun. And on Capitol Hill, more Republicans are joining Democrats in calling for Noem's firing. So that particularly annoys President Trump to have his own Republican people to side with Democrats. That's a red flag for President Trump. So you can be sure that Kristi Noem is going to stay there, but she won't be going to any hot places like Minneapolis for a while at least. So keeping that in mind, I try to put myself into President Trump's shoes here from, following him all these years. And I think that's what he's thinking here. And, and given in wake of that killing, Noem for Preddy of brandishing his gun. And on Capitol Hill, more Republicans again are joining Democrats in calling for Noem's firing. And House Democrats are saying they will move to impeach her if she is not fired this week. So they'll make moves to impeach her. They don't have a majority, but some Republicans might jump on board. Thune, Senator Thune don't seem too enthusiastic about Kristi Noem at this point. So we'll see what happens. That also in response to the fatal shooting of Renee Good. Now we don't want to forget about Renee Good because in what happened here, and she's a part of this because without Renee Good may have this is the straw that broke the camel's back. This second shooting really is the straw that broke the camel's back. Now you have two shootings here with people who seemed they didn't seem like terrorists. Preddy was a nurse in an intensive care unit, and the other lady, Renee Good, I forget what she was, but she was a mother and respected in the community. And so these were not what you would call homegrown terrorists, So anyway, going on. Fatal shooting of Renee Good also in Minneapolis that happened on January 7th, 2026. So that was beginning of the month. And also during an immigration and also during an immigration-related incident, okay? I don't want to dwell into that because we've already seen that plenty of that, and you know the story there, and you could look that up. Google it, okay? Amid Trump defending Noem by saying, this is President Trump, quote, certainly, he shouldn't have been carrying a gun, adding, I don't like that he had a gun. I don't like that he had 2 fully loaded magazines, okay? That's a lot of bad stuff, okay? Now the right, you have the right to carry a weapon, no matter, there's nothing in the Second Amendment or that says you have the right to carry arms, but it doesn't say nothing about you can't carry arms if you happen to be at a protest or wherever you are. There's no restriction if you're a law-abiding citizen and the gun that he had was licensed. He was licensed to carry it. So there's no law that says he can't carry his licensed gun to an event that happens to be a provocative event here, a protest. So there you have that. So the latest from President Trump is that Freddie shouldn't have had a gun at the protest. The protest is the emphasis that President Trump's saying here. But videos from the scene show during the scuffle, Freddie held a phone, but is never seen brandishing the 9mm semi-automatic handgun police say he was licensed to carry. And Noem said Alex Freddie committed an act of domestic terrorism. So Noem made the accusation that he committed an act of domestic terrorism, saying he was brandishing the gun, and that just reinforces her. Take one erroneous statement and you add another erroneous statement, follows from that. It's like a corollary, An erroneous statement follows another erroneous statements in that kind of a illogical sense of making your assumption on a false accusation. All right, so with that in mind, I did something here, and this is what brandishing a weapon really means, and I wanted to emphasize that. Here it is, from The Rifleman. If you ever watched that show when you were a kid. The Rifleman. That's brandishing a gun. Starring Chuck Connors. Okay, that was brandishing a gun, okay? So that was brandishing a gun. We didn't see him doing anything like that, taking out his gun or anything like that. So I wanted to make that example there from The Rifleman. Okay, now here goes the cartoon here. And here is President Trump in the Oval Office with Kristi Noem. And here he is, and here goes President Trump. Kristi, I'm glad you asked for this meeting to give me the opportunity to tell the American people about what a very good job you have done. Okay, there he is. There's President Trump, who says, starts off complimenting Kristi Noem, telling her what a good job she has done. Okay, very good job you have done. Freddie was, and then he goes on to defend her. He defends her by saying that Freddie did wrong by carrying the gun. So to defend Kristi Noem, you have to go back to the gun and say Freddie did wrong by bringing that gun to that protest, and that's how So you try to navigate an irrational field there. I guess it can be done. Okay, Freddie was asking for trouble with his gun fully loaded and with those 2 magazines. Okay, so with those 2 magazines. So what happens here is that Kristi Noem, okay, and she goes on, again, President Trump talking about those fully loaded with those 2 magazines. So Kristi Noem picks up on that here. Here she goes, and she says, Mr. President, we need to find out if Freddie read any other domestic terrorist magazines aside from those 2. So she thought President Trump was talking about regular magazines, and because President Trump had said fully loaded and with those 2 magazines. So she felt in her mind maybe that he was talking about real magazines. He had 2 magazines. So she's wondering here if there were any other domestic terrorist magazines aside from those 2 that Freddie had. Okay? All right. Now, here goes President Trump upon hearing that, and he reacts and he says, Kristi, I am reassigning you to investigating. Here he goes, President Trump. There he is. There he is at his desk in the Oval Office. And he's saying, Kristi, I am reassigning you to investigating domestic floods, hurricanes, and fires, and only California earthquakes. You know, if President Trump feels about California. Okay, with the governor out there. So anyway, and everything else, and you know how he feels about the state of California. Okay, he hasn't been very successful in getting those electoral votes from California. Okay, and only California, she's going to only investigate California earthquakes. Any other earthquakes will be fully investigated by FEMA, but the California earthquakes are going to be investigated solely by Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem. So there it was. There was President Donald Trump in the Oval Office with his report. There he is. And there was Kristi Noem. And there it was. And that was my cartoon. All right, folks. Thank you for watching my video. God bless you. Hang in there. Stay well. And I'll see you next time. Bye.